Tonight, miracle on the Hudson. A jetliner filled with passengers crashes in the frigid waters off Manhattan, and everyone on board survives. U.S. Airways Flight 1549 had just taken off from LaGuardia Airport in Queens for Charlotte, North Carolina, when it apparently hit a flock of birds, knocking out both of the plane's engines.
Cactus 1539 hit bird.
Cactus 1529, turn right 280, you can land runway 1 at Teterboro.
We can't do it. We're going to be nuts.
Even without power, though, the pilots managed to maneuver the Airbus A320 northward over the Bronx, make a sharp turn south, then follow the Hudson River alongside Manhattan Island, losing altitude along the way, and finally coming to rest on the river.
The plane then skimmed across the water 100 yards or more before coming to a rest just off Midtown Manhattan.
Many passengers didn't think they'd make it. One man turned his cell phone on so his body could be found through the phone's GPS. A woman left a message for her husband. Tell the kids I love them. Joining me now is David Sanderson. He was one of the last passengers out of the plane. I understand you were actually in the plane after it landed for 7 minutes. Was it filling up with water?
Yeah, once we got everybody out, I stood in the plane to make sure everybody was out. And it was filling up pretty rapidly, and it got up to about waist level. And then when everybody was out in the lifeboats, I then stepped out on the edge there, and it was about knee deep at that point. And I just jumped in and started trying to swim to the first boat I could find.
Chesley B. Sullenberger III, a former fighter pilot, used 40 years of experience to somehow land the powerless plane on the icy waters of the Hudson River, a feat that's being called a miracle.
Take me inside the plane. Take me inside as this plane impacts on the water. What was going on inside?
It was stone quiet in there, which was amazing to me because I don't think anybody cross-referenced what was going on. And I think that was a saving grace. And I just want to say, I admire your skills. I honor the way you managed your state. And now I do listen to the flight attendants every flight. I know exactly where everything is. I know exactly where the exits are. And I know where that life preserver is.
I'm really proud of a dear, dear friend of mine by the name of Dave Sanderson. Every one of us got a hero inside. Every one of us has a capacity in the most difficult times to find our strength. And it's nice to see a miracle on the Hudson and know that part of that miracle was an extraordinary pilot, and another part of that was a dear friend who, even when he could barely function, made sure other people's lives were being saved and supported.
Wow, thank you. Wow. It's a different perspective up here. Look at all the different colors. Well, thank you so much, Superintendent, for having me today, and Anita. I have the opportunity now to travel the world, and one of the things I share when I come back to Texas is this. There's nothing like the hospitality in Texas that I get. It's amazing. So thank you so much for receiving me here today. Throughout our lives, go back, please. Next one. Back. Throughout our lives, many of us would be tested by a traumatic life experience. These midlife jolts can either propel us or they can derail us, taking us back to square one. These jolts can create a lifetime of purpose, creating relationships, new careers, new worldviews, and a clarity of your mission on earth. That jolt came to me on January 15th, 2009, when I survived the plane crash known as the Miracle on the Hudson. Over the next 20 minutes, I'm going to share with you about being resourceful and employing your own personal leadership skills. Not only you can survive, but you can thrive. And you don't need a plane crash to find your purpose. Before I start, anybody seen that movie, Sully? Anybody seen it? A few people? Cool. Wasn't Clint Eastwood amazing? And Tom Hanks did an unbelievable job. And I was just very fortunate to have a small part in that movie. But one thing that the passengers knew then, but we all know now, is this. That movie was not about the plane crash. It was about the amazing journey of that captain. And the captain and crew did a fabulous job that day, and I'll be forever grateful. But now, let me tell you my story. Let me take you inside a miracle. January 15th, 2009 was a Thursday. That week started for me on Tuesday in Sarasota, Florida. And on Wednesday, we went visit a manufacturing plant in Petersburg, Virginia. That afternoon, we jumped on a train in Richmond and went to New York, because the next day we were going to be in a distribution center in Brooklyn. Now, I don't know if anybody here has ever been or worked inside of a distribution center, but they normally open up quite early in the morning. This one opened at 2 o'clock in the morning. So our day started about 5, and we got done about 10. And I travel over 100,000 miles a year of what I do in my job, so any chance to get home to my wife and my 4 kids a little early, I usually try to take advantage of that. So about 10 o'clock that morning, I called our travel agent and worked with her, and she put me on flight 1549. That moment changed the entire direction of my life. I gave up a first-class seat at 5 o'clock for seat 15A to be on this plane. But I was grateful. I was going home. Now, I don't know if anybody here has ever flown out of New York, but as you fly out of LaGuardia, you go out over the bay a little bit. And, you know, I was almost one of the first set of passengers to board the plane because of my status. So as we were taking off, I was already seated. And one thing I remember is this. I didn't pay attention to the flight crew. I did not know where those exits were. I did not read that little brochure. I didn't know where anything was going on. But I guarantee you, every single time I get on a plane now, I do. Because now I know how important it is to be aware on a plane. And it was a little delayed that day because of the weather. It was 11 degrees and snowing that day in New York, so that's no big deal. So as we took off a little delayed, like I said, we take off over the water. As we started banking, you go sort of north. But about 60 seconds after we took off was when I heard an explosion. It was a loud explosion. Man, I never heard anything on a plane like that before, so it got my attention. So I looked up, and I looked out the window, and I saw fire coming after me to the left wing. So I knew something had happened, but I fly so often, the plane lost an engine. No big deal. See, that's where I think God's grace entered for the first moment in this flight. Because no one on the plane knew at that moment in time what happened on the left side of the plane, also happened on the right side of the plane. And I truly believe they would have cross-referenced or checked in, hey, what did you see? Hey, what did you hear? There could have been a lot of panic. People panic, people lose their heads. And when people start to lose their heads, they start making irrational decisions. This day, 10 years later, the one thing that stays with me, and I bet if you talk to any passenger on that plane, they'll tell you the same thing. You're so quiet, you can hear a pin drop. The guy next to me elbowed me and said, hey, man, what's going on? I said, I think we're going back to LaGuardia. I think we'll go back to the airport. But as we started banking, I saw something that I had never, ever seen before. I saw the skyline of Manhattan up close and personal. And I looked out the window, all of a sudden I saw this bridge coming up. And as we started approaching the bridge is when I heard the only thing I heard the entire time on this plane, when the captain said, this is your captain, brace for impact. Now, I never heard that one on a plane before, so that definitely got my attention. Now, I don't know if anybody here knows about the George Washington Bridge, but it's 600 feet up. The plane was 1,000 feet descending towards the bridge, so we only cleared that bridge by about 400 feet. As I looked out the window, you see people's faces looking up at you. That's how close we were to the bridge. And as we crossed over the bridge, I did two things. First thing I did is I prayed. For whoever that dude is up front, man, just get me down in one piece. Second thing I prayed for is the last person I spoke with, called my wife, tell her I loved her. And the third thing I prayed for is, go to God, forgive my sins. I don't want anything between me and God at this point. We're going down. I want to go up, and it ain't looking good for me right now. The second thing I did is I reached down to my briefcase, got my wallet out, and shoved it down into my pants. Because if something did happen, which looked like it was going to happen, at least they could claim my body. At least my family would know who I was. And then put my head down. And people ask me all the time, what was that last moment like? I'm going to tell you what was happening. You hear people calling people. You hear people texting. But what happened to me is this. I saw the movie of my life pass before my eyes. I saw it when I played Little League Baseball in high school. When I got married, my kids. I saw with such clarity what my life was all about. And I started thinking, this is my life. I saw my entire life with such clarity. It was about 60 seconds after we crossed over the bridge when we crashed into the river. And it was a violent hit. When we hit, I went all the way back in my seat and all the way up in my seat, just like that. When I came back up, I opened my eyes, I looked out the window, and I saw light. So I knew I had a shot, but I wasn't out. Because if you saw the plane landed, water started coming in immediately. And depending on which side of the plane you are, and I was towards the back of the plane, water was anywhere from ankle, knee to waist deep, just like that. And I looked out the window, and all of a sudden, you see the water rising out of the window. Now, you've probably seen that picture of people standing on the wings. You've probably seen that's the one that everybody sort of talks about. People ask me all the time, how do those people get on those wings so quickly? I'm going to tell you what happened. When I looked out, Also, I saw people jumping up on top of the seats, climbing down the seats. And that became a great lesson for me. It's a lesson of resourcefulness. Because one thing I learned at that point is this. When you think you might only have one way to get something done, one option, if you're resourceful, all these things start opening up to you. It's all about resourcefulness. But I didn't think about getting on top of a seat. My game plan was get to the aisle, get up, and get out. But when I got to the aisle, something happened that only changed that day for me, but changed the entire direction of my life. That moment changed everything. My mom kicked into my head. My mom passed away in 1997. But there's something she would tell me when I was a child that just popped into my head. And it was, if you do the right thing, God will take care of you. And, thank you. And the right thing for me was you help other people first. See, I grew up in a small town outside of Cincinnati, Ohio. I ran with a group of guys, and the group of guys I always hung with always had each other's backs. So I went towards the back of the plane to see if anybody needed help. And I got behind everybody in the back, started making my way out with them. Now you got to remember, based on the impact, some of those bins have now popped open. The luggage has flown out. You're waist deep in the water, and it's dark in the back of the plane because it's already underwater. So as you're making your way out, you're sort of hitting things. But the first light that I saw, can you go back to the last slide, please? First light that I saw was, I got out, I looked out on the right side of 10F. When I looked out, there was an amazing sight. Go back to the last slide, please. There was no room on that wing for me. Back to the next slide back, please. There's no room. Yeah, go ahead and run that again. No room on the boat for me, but it was an amazing sight. People were already being rescued. I don't know who said this, and I give them 100% of the credit when they said the crew got everybody down that day, and the crew and passengers got everybody out. But the real heroes of the day were the first responders. And the first of the first responders was the New York waterway, the ferries. They were there about 2 minutes after this plane crashed. There's a lot of ways to describe a miracle. Having someone there to rescue you after a plane crash in ice cold water in just a couple minutes, that's the start of a miracle. Now, as you look at this picture develop, what you're going to see is this. You're going to see an amazing picture because it really tells you a lot about what was going on that day. What you're going to see when this all plays in is one thing you're not going to see is the crew. All the crew went out to the left side of the plane. So the right side of the plane was totally led and managed by people with zero experience, zero training. And that told me a lot about leadership. Because one thing about leadership is this: people lead people. People don't lead projects. People lead people. People step up when things have to be led. That was a great lesson for me in leadership. I had the opportunity many years ago to escort a guy by the name of General Norman Schwarzkopf. Have you ever heard of Schwarzkopf? I had the opportunity to be with him, and I was a whole day with him. I learned a lot of things. He told me that. He said, remember, the rest of your life, people lead people. People don't lead projects. And now as you see this picture come in, you see this. You see me hold on that lifeboat. And the reason why is this. I don't know if anybody here knows anything about the Hudson River. I've learned a lot about it over the last several years. It's got extremely fast current. That plane actually floated down the river about a half a mile in 24 minutes. So that plane was floating down the river. That lifeboat was floating out into the river. And they, like I, and I would say probably you, who reads the instructions? No one reads the brochure. It's actually tethered to the plane, but no one knew that. So they were floating out. They kept screaming, hold on, hold on, hold on. And that's why you saw me hold on to a little lifeboat, waist deep in 36-degree water for about 7 minutes. Now I looked out towards the wing and something caught my eye. It was a lady, and she wasn't moving. Now, you've probably been in meetings like this. You've probably been in classrooms like this where all of a sudden somebody's locked up and you just can't, they don't know what to do. They're in that trance. One of the things I've learned through my training is the way you get the people out, you got to do something radical to break people out of it. So I started yelling at this lady. And all of a sudden she looks at me and is like, who's this old man yelling at me? But I got her attention. And there's a lady on that lifeboat. I grabbed her hand and got her on that lifeboat. And all of a sudden you saw people walking down a wing to get off the plane. Then a couple minutes later, I felt the plane shift, and I don't know what happened until later. I found out there was a tugboat. There was a part of the rescue that hit the front of the plane as it was backing out. It shook the plane. When it shook the plane, I felt water going up my back, and the first thing I thought about was Titanic. I remember that movie when that boat tipped up, I sucked everything down in it, and my thought was, man, do not be sucked down in a plane. You're almost out here. Do not be sucked down in a plane. So I stopped here, and I think my mom and my dad, because they had made me get swimming lessons when I was a child. I mean, never be able to get off this plane. And a few years ago, I started thinking about that moment. And it reminded me of a time when I was 12 years old, and I was in Boy Scouts. Anybody here been in Boy Scouts? I was in Boy Scouts. And I was going for this thing called the Order of the Arrow Award. It's a camping and orienteering award. It's where your dad drops you off when you're 12, so I'll see you in a couple days. And you're out, it's like Survivor on steroids, all right? All these activities, they give you this law, you got to whittle it down. And one of the activities we had to do is get across a river to the other side. Now, yes, you could walk down the bank and go across the bridge, or we're 12 years old. We jumped in the river and swam across the river to get to the other side quickly. I thought, it was that moment when I was 12 years old will give me the certainty to do what I was going to do at that moment in time. Because as soon as I felt that plane shift, I felt water up my back. I'm like, I am out of here. So I jumped in and started swimming to the closest boat that I could find. Had to be into that wing. And that was the longest 10-yard swim in my life, because not only was the water 36 degrees, but there's jet fuel in the water. And I don't know anybody about jet fuel, but jet fuel is very toxic. When I got back and went to the optometrist, he checked my eyes, and this is why you see me wearing glasses today. I got jet fuel in my left eye, and they couldn't get it out. Now, if you saw the movie, if you go back to that picture, please. If you saw the movie, he saw the ferry in the movie had a plastic ladder. Go back, just keep going. All right? That's all right. We'll get there sometime. We'll just keep going. So if you saw the movie, right? The ferry they had a plastic ladder they rolled down. That's the kind of ferry I went to. So when I got there, I got my backside up close, and they were yelling, climb, climb, climb. And I yelled, can't. And then my mom started talking to me again, because the word my mom hated most in life was the word can't. If you grew up in our house and you said, I can't to my mother, she said, if you can't do it, you're going to do it. Her worldview was, if you can't, you must. We grew up in a house where can't wasn't a word. So I got one arm up, I felt somebody grab it. I got the other arm up, I felt somebody grab it. To this day, I do not know who these two gentlemen are. But they pulled me on one of those ferries, threw me over the side. Now they're yelling, get up, get up, get up. And I got up and got to the side of the ferry. I'm like, phew, I made it. But I didn't, because that was my moment. One of the groups I love speaking to, the Mocher firemen. Love speaking to firemen, firefighters. They get it, right? They just get it. And you see these pictures, these firefighters are rushing into the fire, right? But all of a sudden, you see the fire's over, they come back out, they're sitting on the curb, they got nothing left. They've given it all. They have nothing left. That's what happened to me. I was so cold. I can't explain how cold 36-degree water is. It just takes it out of you. But it's amazing where people are in times of a crisis, where God puts people. Because the guy on this ferry, he had a gray suit on, he had a laptop over his back, but most importantly, he was dry. But what did he have? He had an iPhone. He walked up to me and put it in my face and said, call your wife, and I couldn't dial the phone, but I couldn't get it out. And if iOS 12 is working right now, you're going to hear what was said that day from the ferry as all this was going down. That's all I could get out. This is your dad. I've been in a plane crash. Now, my wife's not home waiting for me to give her a blow-by-blow of my day. She actually has a real life. She's taking our son to basketball practice. So my daughter, who then was a junior in high school, is the one who got the message and how to communicate this to my family. Now, anybody here not been in New York or New Jersey? Anybody? Cool people? Can we get that picture back up here again, please? We're going to try it one more time. There you go. Hold it. Don't move it. All right? So this picture, I'll give a quick geography lesson. This picture is great because it tells you exactly where it all went down. So if you look in the middle of the picture, that's the Empire State Building. Big buildings to the left of that, that's Manhattan. But if over there is New York, the other side of the river is New Jersey. And 5 years ago, I had the honor and privilege of speaking in New Orleans with the guy who wrote the plan for maritime rescues in the Hudson. Amazing talk. A plan execution talk. Amazing talk. And I learned a lot of things. But one of the things I learned was pretty basic. Whatever closest point to shore you were is where you're going to go. So you see the plane's facing towards New York, the left side, right side is facing towards New Jersey. I'm heading to Jersey. And I found out later they radioed ahead because they knew I've been in the water. So when we hit shore, there were 3 people waiting for me. 2 EMTs and a guy from the American Red Cross with a blanket. That's why I'm now a national spokesperson for the American Red Cross. Because a little known fact about that day is this. Thank you. Little known fact about that day is this, which you will not get in the media. This is bonus information. There were a lot of groups that touched a lot of people that day. There were 2 groups that touched every one of us. The ferries and the Red Cross with the New York and New Jersey side. But that's where my miracle turns into my mission. And now I want to talk to you about how has a miracle turned into somebody's mission, and how has that mission become realized. Next slide, please. There we go. Cool. The Sunday after the plane crash, I went to my church. And that Sunday, everybody really wanted to talk to me, but there was one guy who really wanted to talk to me. He was in charge of men's breakfast. He came up to me and said, "Hey, Dave, will you speak at men's breakfast next Sunday?" I said, "No problem, man. 50 old guys eating pancakes? Got it. Walk in the park." I didn't know they invited half of Charlotte. 500-600 people show up. I didn't run out of pancakes. Now I have hungry, angry Methodists on my hands. Anybody here a Methodist? If you got a few Methodists, I'll tell you, right? You better have food, right? It might be all right for the Baptists, Episcopalians, and Presbyterians, but if you're a Methodist, you better have food. So I have a bunch of hungry, angry Methodists. I don't even know what I'm doing now. So I'll go behind the curtain and say, "God, give me something to say, man. Give it to me now. Deliver." And he gave me something to say. I get done speaking. 2 men wanted to talk to me. One was from Bank of America, one was from Wells Fargo. That was no big deal. They had people on the plane with me. But I look at the back of the room. I see this elderly lady looking at me, staring at me. She catches my eye. All of a sudden, she starts making her way up over here and takes a hard left. Interrupts this conversation. Interrupts it. Grabs my arm really tight. I'm like, "Whoa." But she looked me in the eye and said something that would change that day for me. That moment changed the entire direction of my life. She looked me in the eye and said, "I was questioning if there really is a God. I don't believe in miracles. But you are physical evidence that there's a God. And he does miracles. Thank you. Thank you." She let my arm go, looked me in the eye one more time, turned and walked away. I look at these 2 men. I've never seen 2 men in my life cry like this. My minister was in the back watching all this, witnessing all this. I'm like looking at him like, what's going on? But all of a sudden it came to me. What happened to me on January 15, 2009 had now impacted somebody who, before she goes to her great beyond, wherever that is, now believes there's a God who does miracles, because I am physical evidence. So when the superintendent and Anita invited me to be here today with you to kick off this year, there's no doubt that I was going to be in Arlington, Texas with you today, because I don't know who I'm going to impact. You go back to 2009, there wasn't a lot of positive things happening in the country, but all of a sudden, you had a crew and passengers that did something that had never, ever been done in the history of aviation. One team, one goal, one miracle, and it gave people hope. There's a passage in the Bible that says suffering produces endurance, endurance produces character, character produces hope, and hope does not disappoint us. That's what only happened that day. I get to do that every single day. What's more important is this: you get to do it every single moment of every single day. You impact young people's minds. You give people hope. This is why it's so important for me to be here today, because what you do is what is going to be the next generation. You impact people's lives. That's why I'm so passionate about what I do. My teachers had a lot of impact on me, as you can probably tell. And that's why I value what you do. The one thing I want to leave you with is this: is success does leave clues. I want to leave you just with 5 things you can take back to the classroom that hopefully you can use, whether it's in your classroom or in your personal life. Next slide, please. First thing I learned is this, if it comes up: process saves lives. It may not be your physical life like it was my physical life that day. Maybe financial or emotional, spiritual, physical. But if you don't have a plan for your classroom, if you don't create your own flight plan for your classroom, those kids will go off in different directions. You got to have a process. If the captain didn't have a process that day and we didn't have a process, I am not here speaking with you today. I'm not here. It's so important to have process. And that's what you do when you create your own flight plans, what you do in your classrooms. Process saves lives. So next slide, please. Second thing I learned is casualness leads to casualties. You can't be casual with these relationships with these kids. You don't know what kind of impact it's going to take them and leave them with. You've got to be focused when you talk to these kids. I love talking to kids. I do a lot of youth. I love speaking to youth. And one thing that really drilled this home for me is this. Earlier this year, I had the honor and privilege of keynoting at NASA down in Cape Kennedy. Amazing experience. I grew up in the 60s. Couldn't be anything bigger than that. And after I got done speaking, I had the opportunity to speak one-on-one with a rocket scientist who was on the Columbia flight team. Anybody ever talk to a rocket scientist? Unbelievable experience. But he told me something that really drilled this in. He told me this. He said, what happened on Apollo 1 didn't happen. If you remember what happened on Apollo 1, all those astronauts died. He said, that doesn't happen, we don't go to the moon. He said, we were taking things so casual at that point. Things were going so well. And we just thought everything was going to be hunky-dory. And all of a sudden, we realized we've got to be focused. We can't be casual anymore. He said, we got casual again, on the space shuttle. His casualness leads to casualties. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. People value people. This is what you do. See, you wouldn't be teaching if you didn't value people, right? I mean, this is what it's all about. You have your characters coming out every time you get in front of these kids. And you know, who's the greatest teacher in the history? My opinion is Jesus. Who did Jesus hang out with? He didn't hang out with the cool kids, right? He hung out with people who needed help. This is what your mission is. Try to emulate being the best teacher, because people value people. Next slide, please. The power of teamwork. How does 155 people who do not know each other or care about each other come together in less than 6 minutes to do something that never been done in history? How does that happen? I'll give you two things. Number one, you check your ego at the door. When you're going down in a plane crash, I don't care if you're the CEO of American Airlines or you're the janitor. Everybody's the same. Everybody's the same. So you check your ego at the door and get the mission done. Focus on the mission. If you saw the movie, you probably heard there's one line in the movie. If you watched it, it said, "No one dies today." That was the theme. No one dies today. That was the mission. Second thing is this. When given the opportunity to lead. Leaders step up. Leaders step up in the most trying times, because what happens is that one becomes a leader is this. The person with the most certainty in most uncertain times. You become the leader. It doesn't matter who you are. If you give certainty to people, you're the leader. Power of teamwork, coming together. This is what this is all about. This is what the superintendent's bringing you in here. This is one big team. You may have different allegiances, but you have one big team and one big focus. And congratulations on going to 86. I won't get that out on Twitter. I will promise not to do that just yet. Next slide. Last but not least is grace is fueled by gratitude. You know? What is gratitude? Gratitude is giving thanks to something bigger than yourself. You know, people ask me all the time, do you really think this is a miracle? I tell people this, that I don't know, what a miracle really is, but one thing I do know is this. With men, a lot of things are impossible. With a greater being, everything is possible. So if you tie that together, this is a miracle. Because nothing, unless you have a greater being and you give grace and you give gratitude, grace will come to you. That's why grace is fueled by giving gratitude, something bigger than you are. Thank you. I would love to stay in touch with y'all. And the way I do that is LinkedIn. If you're on LinkedIn, please just check me out on LinkedIn, because every day I put out new content on leadership. My focus, I'm going to tell you my focus over the next 10 years, impact 1 million people with this message of self-leadership, personal leadership. And you can help me. Just check me out and just put my message out. That would help me greatly. And last thing I'll leave with is this. There was a land for 1,000 years. There's a people in a land of not enough. But all of a sudden, a leader, a teacher came in and moved them a land from not enough to a land of just enough. And for 40 years, they lasted in that land. All of a sudden, a bunch of leaders came in, a bunch of teachers came in and moved them to a land of not just enough to a land of more than enough. My goal for you this year is this. You move these kids from a land of just enough to a land of more than enough by leading them, giving them inspiration, focusing on do the right thing. In every circumstance, just do the right thing and it will work out for you. I want to say may God bless you and may God bless your school district. But right now, most important, may God bless the United States of America. We need a lot of help. God bless you all. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Come on, Arlington. Let's give them a big Arlington. Thank you. Thank you so much, Mr. Sanderson.
Thank you very much. God bless you all. Thank you. Thank you.